Two PTs, one podcast. We are back and we are doing things slightly different at the minute. I think we're starting our podcast now with a quote. Me and Myles are going to dissect the quote and then we're going to get into the main topic, which today is tempo. But the quote from my side today is I'd rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. So for me, yeah.
Who's
So
that? Who's that by?
That is my standpoint where I'm saying in terms of getting stronger, in terms of getting healthier and everything else, like you might not need to be in such a healthy position or so strong or so quick, but it's better to be in the position and require it than be a gardener in a war where you're just completely out of your depth and you're not sure what to do.
Yeah. Good. You're going to tell the people who inspired it?
I cannot remember. I can find
not
out.
Michael Jordan.
Pardon?
Is it not Michael Jordan?
No, that won't be Michael Jordan. I'll let you dissect your side and then I'll get the quote.
This is a great start. People are going to think, wow, these guys are so knowledgeable. My interpretation of that is just being the best you can be, or being a master of the job that you're in hand. There's no point doing anything if, for example, you're not there to master everything. If that's one of your goals and stuff like that, and being the best you possibly can be, and lacking no quality. That's what I mean. That's what it is.
I'm going to be a pin in the dick right now and say, actually, all it says is Chinese proverb.
All right.
It doesn't even say a person. It just says Chinese proverb. But yeah, I mean, a lot of my room and even my business is based off Japanese culture. So I think it's for me, it's quite similar to me. But we will try and bring out. I've one on my board, and we'll do that one next week. But today's topic is discussing tempo, and there's two sides of it really, from Myles' side of the performance and S&C, and mine in terms of the muscle building, and I think more of an execution standpoint. Obviously, Myles will still have the execution side, but I think it's important in terms of understanding how to move through a movement properly and how to teach it isn't just going through, saying, a deadlift and doing it in the same speed that you do a 1 rep max. Like you're going to need to break it down and slow it down so that you fully understand what happens during the movement.
Yeah, for people who don't know what tempo is, it's pretty much the time you spend articulating in an exercise. So some people might have seen the 4-digit one. So for example, the 4-digit one is pretty much the first number is always the eccentric part of the loading, which is, let's say we're doing a barbell squat, it'll be the lower half. Second number will be the isometric, which is the static part before you come up. Third number will be actually a number or an X, which stands for explosive, which means in the going up phase or the concentric stage. And the fourth one is the amount of time it takes before you do another rep.
Yeah, so
yeah, go on, Mike.
No, I was just going to say, if anyone's watching on YouTube, just to put it in terms of an application for say this is a leg extension. So you're at the top, the eccentric is the coming down, the isometric is the pause at the bottom before we take the next rep. And then for Myles to say the explosive side or the concentric side, this is when we bring the legs back up to extend and go through the quad, and then we repeat. But that's the application for an exercise. It'll basically work for the application of everything. So the same will work for a bicep curl and everything else.
Yeah. But yeah, pretty much any coaches or people who obviously train with coaches and stuff like that, that's one of the first things that people get taught is tempo. Yeah. And tempo is important. Yeah, I'm not saying it isn't important. It is an important aspect and stuff like that. There definitely is a time and a place for tempo. But definitely today we're going to be discussing about some of the reasons why it may be more important and some of the reasons why it might not be so important at the moment. So we're looking from a muscle building standpoint. One of the key aspects for muscle building is volume, so the amount of stuff that you actually do, and the time under tension. So the actual longer you spend doing them reps. Because obviously what we're trying to look for when it comes to muscle building is to break down the muscle tissue, the actual elongating of their fibers, breaking down sarcoplasm, lactic acid, all that type of stuff that are obviously building obviously more swelled, more defined muscle fibers.
Yeah, you're causing that tissue breakdown. You're going to go away and then actually physically recover from.
Yeah. And for people who don't know what lactic acid is, it's that burn you feel after you do a couple of reps. It's pretty much the body's like fatigueness mechanism in a way. Yeah. It helps you stop. It kind of stops you from doing what you want.
But if you feel it whilst you're peeing, then it's not lactic acid.
No, that's just a burn. But yeah, I mean, for example, like tempo is in like I said in the bodybuilding bit, mate, is massive. Like it's one of the first things. I mean, like you've seen all the great people do it. Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's all the bodybuilders I know. Grant Steve. They're all the great people that I know. But yeah, tempo is a massive thing, and that's why there's so many things about confusion about heavy weights and low reps and light weights and massive reps. When it comes to a muscle building standard thing, they're the two variables that you want to look at that would particularly matter. I mean, what's your opinion on that?
Well, I look at it in terms of, I mean, we've spoke about it on the podcast before in terms of the triangle of volume, frequency, and intensity, and it's all going to be relative, but the time under tension is going to be all within each of those.
Yeah,
it's like you can have the frequency of doing 20 sets of 10 reps at a really low weight, or we can actually go through the phase where we're actually working through the muscle effectively and actually working to build strength at the same time, which realistically, no one wants to not gain strength. They just are so focused on the visual side of things that it's just So it's actually understanding that we're going through a heavy load under a controlled system and modality to then be like, right, okay, this is when we're actually going to build the muscle and break down the tissue to then help us grow.
Yeah, but that's standard progressive overload. Like obviously I've just said there's two variables, but it's that variable you need as well. You need to progress. You need, if at one point, whatever you're doing, if you keep doing the exact same things over and over again, your body will get used to it. That thing that what was that?
Wiped down my whiteboard from a progressive overload talk the other day, and I could have just gone.
I've got a video on it, so if any of you guys obviously want to see a little bit more expert on that, hop yourself over to that. But yeah, you need to constantly grow and stuff like that. But on the flip side of things as well, like Mike just said, there are a lot of people out there who don't just look at the aesthetics. They obviously look at the practicality of what you can do, which is obviously going to be how much you particularly much put on the bar. So if that's an example of something to do, like I just made, it's simple. You can either just drop down the repetitions and put a little bit more weight. Now, something that I've been researching in quite a bit is pretty much the use of all muscles. So when we do an exercise, we don't just recruit all muscle straight away. And what I mean by that is in our actual muscle, and there's a load of different fibers, different types of fibers. There's particularly three: type 1, type 2, type 2X. Type 1s are your more slow twitch muscle fibers. Type 2 and type 2X are going to be more your fast twitch, but your type 2X are your more explosive. They're pretty much the higher the type 2, the more explosive they are, but more susceptible to fatigue that they are. So they're your bigger outlet. Where type 1 on the opposite side aren't your particularly strongest fibers, but they can last for a while. So for example, let's say the calf is quite particularly type 1 because we stand a lot. We stand a lot on it. We do a lot of walking on it. It's used to doing that high repetition at a low threshold. But then again, something like the hamstrings, especially if you're someone who's a sprinter or a runner, are going to be particularly type 2 fibers simply because you're constantly moving at a quite quick pace. Yeah. So there's another variable that I look at, which is something called the size principle. And it pretty much is the more engaging a muscle fiber, more engaging the group of muscle fiber is, the higher output you're going to need. And vice versa, it's that. So if you need more of an output, let's say you're lifting nearer to your 1 rep max, the more muscle fiber recruitments that you're going to need.
Yeah.
And this is where things start getting a little more complicated, where people do get mixed up about, right, do I need to do lighter weight, high reps, or heavyweight to high reps? Because like I was just discussing with Mike just then, if that is particularly true, and let's say, for example, like the idea of you moving lighter weights fast, as well as doing the heavy loading stuff and trying to recruit as much muscle fiber as I'm, which means that that means you're not completely disrupting tempo, but you're trying to get a rep done as explosive as you can with proper form and intent, then them 4 digits that we were just talking about them don't particularly matter. Now, I know a lot of people still use the tempo thing. I'm not saying it's completely wrong and stuff. It has its complete place. But if that's completely true, then doing high repetition and spending a lot of time in reps and stuff like that particularly doesn't have its place if you're looking from a performance aspect.
Because if for me to look at that from my side, it's all going to be relative to you being explosive, which for you and your football, for you and your athletes, for those that want to be quick and explosive, it's one of those things. But the goal of someone to try and build muscle isn't going to be explosive.
That's what I mean. But I'm just saying, like when we were saying before, and the fact of it's very, very few the fact, unless you're someone who's doing a bodybuilding show, that you're going to be just solely looking at the way you looked. You're going to be looking at the performance aspects of it. So let's say we now try and introduce this to the everyday client. Now, I'm not saying that you've got someone who's had no training experience, no idea how to do normal lifting or anything like that, and go, right, I need you to move this as quick as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to movement, there are two variables that pretty much change the aspect of how they move: speed and weight. They change. If they can't handle the load, something will shift. If they don't have great coordination and don't know the move very well, something will change. So tempo has its place for beginners because, like we were discussing right before, someone who doesn't know how to do a particular movement, let's say a big compound movement like a deadlift or something, they're going to need that time. They're going to need to spend a lot more time in the reps to make sure that they get the movement right. So they build that coordination, build some kind of like memory, build some comfortability in it before they start going, right, I want you to move this with intent, move it like it's got 100 kg on the bar, or someone who can lift that a little bit more, and really drive yourself up into that. Because once you start moving something quick, you haven't got time to think about things. You've only got to do one thing and get that bar as quick as you can. And then, but when I'm saying that, I'm not saying like, when you see some people in the gym and they're bouncing the weight. You can hear the bar clashing and just bam. I do not mean that. I do not mean that in the slightest. Every rep should be its own. You should be moving it with quality, reset, breathe, brace, do it again. And then once the quality drops, that's when you can bin it. But that's in itself. That could be a topic in itself. That can almost like, you could say like, right, even if the rep scheme is, let's say 4, 5 times 8 or something like that, 4 sets of 8 or something, and the quality drops at 6, and you bin it then, how much does that rep range really matter? Because we're only just using it as a volume gauge, a volume gauging of where you want to be.
Yeah, because I mean, you literally took the words out of my mouth there. But then I think a lot of it is down to the conditions of what we do as well. Because like you said, if we're working through something like a deadlift, there's so many variables and so many factors in terms of a coaching point that we would physically put into a client. And obviously we might even adapt a load of them to each individual depending on like their physical structure. So we might need to change the tempo at certain points, or if we get to a certain point where we are slow out the bottom but quick from the knees to the hips, and even just making slight changes like that, but then also going into the fact of the path of motion and everything that happens within a machine might allow us to be a lot more powerful because we don't have to think about other things.
Yeah, the stability aspects is out of it and stuff like that. So that's a safe way of introducing that kind of explosiveness.
Mm.
But again, another reason why you might want to use tempo work is people coming out of rehab. Like if you try to get someone who's particularly just, let's say they've done their ACL and they're recovering from that, and they've got the okay to start weight training, then that's a lot of stress you're going to put on that. And you don't want, obviously you don't want to redo an injury. So you slowly build them up to it, and you slowly start increasing intensity, because if you really move explosive, you'll know you're knackered. Like it takes a lot of energy. You're using everything you've got to muster something to move from one area to the other. And that takes a lot of strength in itself to control that.
Because I think if you broke down a movement, so I'm going to be really basic from my side of things and compare a hack squat and a barbell back squat. The intent and the energy that you're going to put into a hack squat could be at 90 to 100% on just being as explosive and as strong as possible. Whereas if you went to like a barbell squat, you're probably going to be about 60, 70% because you've got to wonder and worry about everything else that's going on in terms of stability, positioning, making sure that we're actually going up at the right pace and not lifting the hips up too quick. When you're in a fixed position, the tempo isn't really as much as of a doubt. Whereas if you're going through like multi-joint movements in an unstable condition, it's going to take a lot more for you to be like, right, okay, I need to do this at this pace, especially when I'm a beginner, or else I could lift my hips up too far, my chest falls forward, and everything fucks up.
Yeah.
And that's like, that seems very extreme when we're talking about tempo, but at its level, it's one of the things where I'm not going to put in a 4-2-1-2 to a client that's just new in. We're looking at the standard's probably going to be a 2-2-2-2 because we know that for them to understand what's working during a movement, so even the leg extension again, for them to know, oh, I feel this in my quads, and not, oh, my knees feel like crap because I'm putting a lot of tension and stress through my knee, which might not be used to that kind of load.
Well, that's what I mean. It does put a lot of stress in the joints. So there's a, honestly, when you got to take a few things into consideration before you start going, right, I'm going to get you to move as quick as you possibly can.
Yeah.
One's obviously is going to be training age, so how experienced they are in the gym. Obviously, you can look at age in general. I mean, if it's a little bit on the mature side, and when I'm saying the mature side, I'm talking about a little bit older, then they might have some niggles, some things they might not want to consider. So getting the control in that, but then other experts will go. Obviously, again, the exercise in question, that's going to be obviously what you're going to have a look at as well. Because like you just mentioned there, something like a hat squat, which is set in a way of how it moves, compared to a barbell squat, is have different requirements.
Yeah, I'm not even going to get into the physics.
It's two different stimulus.
Yeah, I'm not even going to, because I've just come off a call and we were discussing the hack squat in terms of the angle and the weight distribution over everywhere. So even that's a thing to consider, whereby that's probably a different topic, but the load that we put on might not be relative to different stuff as well. So
well,
that's
what I mean. So
dumbbell pressing 40 kilo dumbbells might seem really difficult, but then you've got to wonder, oh, I've got the stability factor of making sure that this is kept in a line of motion that's not going to cause any issues. Whereas I go to a fixed bar or a resistance, like a pin or a plate loaded, where it's in a fixed line of motion and path of motion, that might be 50. But then the tempo that we're doing to each will pretty much be the same, just so that we're actually getting everything right.
Yeah.
And actually through TUT, like time and attention, and actually executing it correctly and not just being like,
yeah, but that's the thing is like it was like, because obviously I've obviously started obviously integrating this with some of my clients, some of my athletes and stuff like that. And for someone who's been used to doing, like, let's say a lot of eccentric training, which is gets a bit of a mix in as well. A lot of people think eccentric training is going very slow in an eccentric, so lengthening the muscle. When it's not, you're just moving slow in an eccentric state. Eccentric training is you're maximizing the eccentric qualities, because eccentric is a very efficient. It's also our strongest path of movement.
Yeah.
We're always going to be stronger eccentrically than we are concentrically. So what I mean by that is the fact that, let's say, for example, we do something like a split squat. You're going down in that split squat with a little bit heavier load, and then you're coming back up with your two legs and really emphasizing that state. But the reason why I say that, in fact, of all that, because again, if you're trying to maximize something, regardless if it's a performance things, you don't want to move slow. To be fair, like, as I put this in the sports related, I don't think I'm going to walk myself into a goal. It's either going to be a short sprint and I'm kicking that ball, particularly quite hard.
Yeah.
And I'm going to use a lot of force to hopefully get that ball in the back of the net. If not, about 40 yards higher because I can't shoot. The reason why I'm a right back. But yeah, it's not just, again, it's not even just same again. It's and the way we can use tempo training to really engage what we need to do is going to be very effective when it comes to understanding how your body works and using the right correct force for our particular movement.
Yeah.
Now, again, tempo can be also used as an engagement of, right, if you can move this a lot slower, even though you don't have to, is that progression? Possibly, yes. If you had to force yourself and almost jerk your way up from the bottom of the squat to the top on 100 kg, but then next thing you notice, like a few weeks, few months, years down the line, you're able to control that with ease, then you're stronger.
Yeah.
That's one way you can obviously use tempo.
A good indicator for me that I've gone through in the past is saying to a client, like, right, we want to be able to move this in a fashion that the body's going to be able to cope with it and not cause additional stress that might be happening within the joints and etc. etc. So I want you to be
additional stress. We mean too much stress.
Yeah.
We do want to cause the body additional.
Oh yeah, there's obviously the stress that we're trying to impose to the body and the muscle, but then there's the stress that is the byproduct of not training to a level that we want. So it's saying, if I want you to move this from point A to point B, but I want you to do it at a pace where you're not jerking it, and I can say to you at any point during this movement, you can pause or stop. Because if we're not loading through there, how much are we actually working through and not just being like,
But the thing is, if you move something particularly really quick, like let's say, for example, let's say clean and jerk, let's say Olympic lifting. You're telling me if I were to, I understand where you're getting from.
Yeah, but that's my point, though.
Move that as quick as I can. There is no way, if I want to get something up heavy and use as much force as I possibly can, there's no way I'm going to be able to stop that midway. That's going to go all the way and catch.
Like, so, this is, I'm talking TUT in terms of, like, I know in a deadlift, if I'm trying to hit 180 on a deadlift, I'm not going to say, hey, Mike, just see if you can stop halfway up your quad.
Yeah, exactly. But then that's when you're saying before in percentages.
Yeah.
Like, we're saying this, like, even though you, for example, we want something to move particularly well, if you got lighter weights, move them quick. It doesn't have to be 100% all the time. You don't need to lift something to the max of your abilities all the time. And this is where splitting up in your training program can be a really good thing. You could have a strength stage. You could be a bit more where you're trying to move this as quick as you can, try to use this with much force. And then you can recruit some accessory work and do that kind of time and attention if obviously then both modalities work for you. If you want to be strong and good look like that, and then you want to look quite well and have big biceps and shit like that, then you can split your programs like that. Or you could have a heavy day and a light day and do some kind of uncongelating, I can't even say the word now, uncongelating periodization, which pretty much means that you're periodizing a certain intent, certain method, a certain goal to a training program, but it might be split different. Like you would if you do a 1 day upper and 1 day lower. 1 day you could do 1 day higher, 1 day lower, lighter.
this is quite funny actually, because I just started reading. Do you know Atomic Habits?
Yeah,
James
yeah,
Clear.
yeah.
So I've got through like the intro, and then I'm on the first bit, and I just got through the bit, and it's on about the aggregation of marginal gains and the 1% a day. And if you improve 1% per day for a year, you're up like 37.38 times. If you're 1% down every day for a year, it's like 0.03, like to zero. So whilst it might be a pain in the arse for us to say, right, we're going to go through tempo training every single time, but we want to improve everything. Like in terms of like, I'm starting to put this in for clients now. It's like, if you can't improve your training side, let's work to improve your nutritional side. If you can't improve your nutritional side, we'll work to a lifestyle phase. And like, we want the 1% for every day to improve and then to get gradually better. And in the same respect, it's progressional overload through the tempo training, through the TUT, through the muscle building, through the power phase, or whatever we're putting the training through, is always just requiring 1% minimum. Obviously, if you can make bigger jumps and not avoid any additional stress or injury risk, that's fine. But the 1% each day is what's going to make those gradual marginal gains.
Yeah, exactly. But that's generally basically you're not going to be able to put 100% or 100% attempt into everything all the time. Sometimes it can take other priorities. But let's say even like in the training aspect, before we have power, we need strength and speed. Like it's a combination of the two. Before strength and speed, you need the accurate muscle to have strength, and it's obviously to have the speed and all that. It's that force velocity curve. Like there is a figure of way it goes and stuff like that. So yeah, it's exactly like it's knowing when to go for it and knowing when to work in percentage of that to then peak up to go into that.
I would just like to say for anyone that is listening, I can't speak for Myles on this, but my interpretation of tempo is quite low in terms of what it'll do for each individual. But I understand the premise and the principle to working through TUT and control and execution long term. If you aren't working with a coach that is at least willing to try and explain it, they're not really understanding what you want to achieve. So like I'm going to make everything relative for my client in terms of exercise selection, exercise execution, and everything else relative to you. And it's like I'm not going to come in and have someone that wants to be the next Ronnie Coleman doing power phase training. And that's a manipulation of absolutely everything. So the tempo and the tempo, although it might just seem really monotonous, that's probably not the word I'm after, but it might not seem like the most important thing. It's actually really big in terms of how we conduct ourselves during a session and how we actually execute to the long-term goal. Because I could literally get you to do a bench press and change the tempo and the outcome could be completely different.
Pretty easy said.
Yeah, but I think we've slated shit coaches before. I'm not going to do it anymore. But I think the funny thing is, if George's listening to this, me and George have a lot of conversations about this because you do your level 2 and you do your level 3, and it's like, yeah, I'm ready to take on the world. And I think it's a massive slap in the face when you realize that there is so much more to learn and you will never learn it all.
Yeah. But that's going into a completely different conversation.
Yeah, but this is the
interpretation. We can go on all day about
No.
the base level of what PTs get, but particularly the people who are going to be listening to this, I'm going to be level 3 PTs. They're going to probably be clients who want to be better in their training.
Like for me to come in go on.
I was going to say there's that like, yeah, if it's training focused and stuff like that, then having a good relationship with any coach, any training partner and stuff like that, having that ability to go, what kind of range are we working on? Are we working on slow work and muscle building and stuff like that? Or am I going to move things quick?
Yeah.
Am I going to be powerful with this? Am I going to and if that's there, because the thing is with like with kind of power work and stuff like that, if you can't bring that intent to the table, you don't do it at all. Because especially with the quality of movement that's involved when it comes to stuff like that, once that quality drops, you're just teaching body really bad coordination. And you
The
need
idea
to,
of power is power, not
yeah.
just some.
I say that with power, it says with anything and stuff like if you can't train with I kind of want to say proper form, but form is kind of relative.
Intent is the biggest word, I think.
Yeah, intent. If you can't
Go ahead,
train with
right.
intent, then you're going to get some results, but you're not going to get the most if you don't train with that next level intent. And you need to bring that kind of to your training. Try to bring that game all the time. But we all know that's not going to happen. I know in myself, I don't bring my A game to every single training session. I try to put myself in a good state for it, whether that's regarding my sleep, nutrition, whatever. But sometimes we're just not going to have that. But when we're in it, we're focused on it.
I think
elsewhere.
I think it draws a new understanding of the word intensity, though. Because not just what you put in, it's the level of like, right, the intent and the intensity within it is completely different, because I can be intense and have a high level intensity, but I still might not want to move a weight in a second. I want to be intent and intense within a 4-second rep range, which is, I think, a bit of a misconception of people when they say intensity. It's just like, yeah, I'm going to get angry. No.
Yeah, but that's the thing is that intensity is one of the easiest things to gain. Like one of the easiest things we can do as coaches is give clients a hard workout. That's quite easy to do. But whether working, this is going way into depth now, but whether working that extra little bit harder is actually going in line of where you want to go is two different things. I can easily, like, if you came to me and said, I just want a hard workout, I can make you work. I can make you work, make sweat, all that kind of stuff. But certain goals have different requirements for them.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's going to have different requirements of tempo, volume, intensity, frequency, all that in nature. And that's why, for example, training experience and knowing the movement in and out is quite a key attribute.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, I think I have people that will come to me and I could get away with not needing to PT them. Like, I know it's really bad for me to say it, but the biggest thing that they lack is the intensity of someone being like, no, you are missing some really key factors in terms of your conception of tempo. And if you're counting to 4 and you're like 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4, or actually just falling short of like 2 reps or 3 reps when you're like, oh no, I'm done. I'm like, you're nowhere near done. There's just like complete different levels of understanding, because trainers, I think, to a certain extent, know their level of intensity, and like me and you will train quite intense.
Yeah.
And that we know the level and we can see the level 99% of the time and be like, you're not there yet. But that's why you're here. Like, we're here to help you get to that level and reach that next stage of training, which is why
there's a level of guidance. But even still, like, I've been training for 10 years since I was 17, 16. And even I sometimes need to kick up the bum. I have my coach and he ruins me every single time I have a training session and stuff like that. But it's ruining me in the right way.
Yeah.
Knowing that when, for example, like I wanted to train this morning, knowing I couldn't bring myself to that ring, I've given myself a rest day because I would have just gone for the emotion.
And I did that as well.
That's what I mean. And when you think of it in that kind of way, sets and reps are one of the things that least matters. But that's going in for another discussion in itself.
Yeah.
Go on, what is it, Mike?
No, I was just going to pick up on the fact of like, everything that a client will do to you, for as much as you will freaking hate them, is done with the best intent and the most love possible. But they are doing it and setting these up for you so that you get the best results possible. Like they're not doing it for the sake of doing it. They know that you might not want to do those 2 reps. They might not want to make you go through those 2 reps, but they know that is what the difference is. Or slowing down your eccentrics just to be like, this is what we need to do. I'm sorry, but it's true.
Well, I think you might hate us for it, but yeah. But you could definitely tell by the side of like when either me or Mike speak about tempo, how different you can talk. And I think that's the beauty of training. You'll get two complete guys who love their training, do the business, but we'll talk about the same aspects in 2 different lights. And it's one of the things like what we were saying before, Mike, the fact that's like the more you know, the less you realize you don't know. And that might sound really daunting, but it's that continuous growth of learning.
I freaking love it. I actually love it now. I used to hate it when I was at school. Be like, I'm never going to get all this. And now I'm like in an industry where there's no roof. Like you'll just keep on going. Like freaking, I've still got the anatomy book here.
And that's like, the thing is this, and the thing is as well, like you might get someone who might, for example, do something, go away from it, and then come back to it. And it's not because they were wrong, because it's not because they found something nice and new and they wanted to try it out. It's because everything's changing. The research starts changing, the application of things have changed and stuff like that. The more we have understandings, the more we try to do stuff and stuff like that. But that's the developer being a coach, that's the developer being everything. But I'm going to end on that kind of point there, simply because I think we've kind of gone through everything in tempo. We've kind of gone through everything else, kind of regarding training and the applications of it.
That was a cracking episode, I must say.
Yeah, we're quite happy about this one. Even episode are we on? We're on episode 36, 35?
33, I think, but I think we're not naming numbers anymore just so we can chuck them up
whenever. We're changing the numbers to quotes now. We've become that. You're going to get on the tab, you're going to see fitness, you're going to see inspirational as well.
My name is Jocko Willing.
Oh, God. Let's not do that. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the end of this episode. If you have any questions regarding anything that we've talked into this podcast episode today, you can either message us on our social medias. That'll be in the link description below. If you enjoyed this episode regarding whether you watch this on YouTube, Spotify, or any kind of like social medias or anything like that, make sure you please give a like, 5-star rating, and a review so we can spread this out and obviously get more happy new listeners. And enjoy the weekend. It's we've done this episode on a Friday. It's a very sunny day here in Congleton.
It's Saturday.
It's Saturday. It's Saturday. It's Saturday. I can't believe I just said Sunday. Anyway, on that note, enjoy your day, enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Peace out.